Thanks, and welcome back to The Learning Curve. We're here with Jana-Rae Yerxa, and she's sharing some amazing information. So I just want to continue with that conversation. So as I was saying during the break, and I have the chance to talk with Jana all the time, and she really helps me with unpacking, right, and looking at privilege and colonialism and how it's affected me and my life. So we had an amazing conversation about the term ally. And you really got me to look at that differently. So I really wanted you to share that so the audience could learn as well.
Well, I just think the term ally is a really loaded term. And I'm a firm believer in the language that we use. Language is so powerful.
Very.
Because it shapes everything, right? I'm all about context. So the term ally is a loaded term. And I think that it's a term that in some ways, and I don't know why this is, but people have seen it as a term that they could give themselves, that they could embrace. And when we're thinking about structures of power and domination, that is very problematic, because for people that may not have access to power, like equal access to power and resources, it takes away their ability to name who they identify and see as somebody working with them and standing in solidarity.
That is absolutely excellent. And what it brought to mind, again, in the cross-cultural communication training I do, we talk about a guide. That when you're going to work in a community, you need to find that guide. But we stress that the community decides who that guide is, the person that can help them understand the protocols in that community so you can be respectful, right? That you don't just go in there and assume you know this stuff. Find someone who's willing and capable of doing that, and that's not someone you assign that task to.
And
right?
Just because certain people may have embraced you in that role doesn't mean that everybody has to.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that that's something we can think about beyond our own communities as Indigenous people, but also we need to have those discussions within our communities as Indigenous people too. Right?
Exactly. The other thing that came to my mind when we had the original discussion about ally was that saving mentality again. So I went to like the military definition, and when do we need our allies? Well, when we're under attack, right? During a war. But I want friends all the time. I don't want people just flying in when there's a crisis and taking up space, as you said, or grabbing the mic. It's like back to what you were saying earlier. How about some meaningful, true relationships?
Right. And I think that going back to seeing and understanding settler colonialism as a structure that we are all socialized in and marinated in how settler colonialism implants myths into ourselves and how we see ourselves in each other. I think that allows us to build meaningful relationships, but also build friendships to not only help liberate a certain population, but all of us, right? All of us, because we are all impacted by this system of oppression.
Exactly. And quit putting us into that box, right? And then classifying us. Real relationships, human beings, right? Ask me, care, right?
Yes, and it impacts us differently though, and I think that's the key piece, right?
Yeah.
Is that it impacts us differently. And so because it impacts us differently, we have different roles and responsibilities in terms of trying to address that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And the other thing I run into all the time, and it's that generalization. Like mainstream loves to go fast. So if they get the information, the answer from one person, they want to assume that the answer is across the board with everyone. And I know we're going to do another show on it, but when it comes to Indigenous, Aboriginal, or First Nation, I get one, ask that all the time. And two, no matter what my answer is, the response is usually, well, so-and-so told me that I could use this word. I was like, well, go ahead and use that word with that person.
Right.
But it's not across the board, as you said.
No, it's not across the board. And I think too that, we just got to call it what it is, right? Like that type of approach is racist. Mm-hmm. It's rooted in racism, and whether we realize that or not. And I just need to say too, for the audience, like when we're talking about racism, one of the myths out there is that bad people are racist. Okay. And that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. Nobody likes to see themselves as racist. But I think that when we are, like our education system's improving now, but when we are rooted in a structure, and we are misinformed and we're not told proper information, we carry ideas. Mm-hmm. We carry ideas. And so, for instance, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission coming out, and there has been so much talk about residential schools.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think about with residential schools is, where are the ideologies that has allowed Indigenous children to be kidnapped from their families? Where do those ideologies exist? Mm-hmm. And are they still alive?
Yeah.
And I would say that those ideas are still alive, and their homes are within us.
Yeah. I would say it's still alive too. Look at our children in care.
Yes.
I mean, the system has changed.
Yes.
It's not residential schools anymore. It's just a different format. But our kids are still being taken away. Our kids are still being rewarded for being more like the oppressor than our own cultures or traditions. And that's the kind of stuff we have to look at, right?
That's right. How have we as Indigenous people internalized this way of being, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it's such a deep topic, and it's a journey. I know for me, it definitely has been, because I want to honor traditions. But then when you start looking at, well, where did that tradition come from? Just because my mom did this, well, who taught her to do that? And why did she do that, right?
Yes.
And sometimes those aren't our traditions. And that's where you see the colonialism had its effect.
Yes.
Right?
And I think too, like, does this way of doing things does it leave me feeling empowered?
Yeah. Exactly.
Does it leave me feeling empowered? That's a good way to measure it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's excellent. I want to thank you so much for coming out today. That was absolutely amazing. I think we could talk for 4 or 5 hours.
It's a big topic, right?
It's a huge topic. And that's a really good lead-in. Thank you for that. I do want to say, if you're watching this and you feel more confused than ever, welcome to the journey.
It's a good place.
Yeah. We're walking there together. We have to keep asking these questions, disrupting the norm. We have to learn. And if we actually walk together, then we've got a chance of making a difference. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, if you have any questions, please email me or give me a call. The information's right on the screen. And just remember, it's a learning curve. And when you're learning something new, it's always going to feel uncomfortable. But together, we can do this. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.